152. Overall, I think this was a pretty transitional episode, and that there wasn't a whole lot going on, to be honest. But I do think that it was appropriate and that it served its purpose. So with that said, let's dive into it. This episode starts with Team 7, excluding Kawaki, looking for a ride to Chojuro as he's already headed to the battlefield. Tonally, it's evident at this point in the story that this is fully Boruto's moment, and by extension, Mitsuki and Sarada are simply there as support for him and his resolve. This, in my opinion, is reiterated later on in the episode as they're on their way to the Funado ship, and honestly, it feels appropriate, with all the stress that he being Boruto, he's had over the last few episodes, and I mean, this guy was down pretty bad. It's nice to see his pain and trauma channeled into a greater purpose. I gotta give it to him. So, I mean, soon enough, after exhausting all the options for finding a ride, Kajiki shows up with his ship. And honestly, his arrival felt a little too timely for me, but I'm glad that they addressed it with Boruto echoing the same sentiments. You know, he was like, hey, I mean, your time was really perfect. I'm like, yeah, it was a little too perfect. But all in all, I could appreciate it because I think it helps with the story's pacing all in all and allows him to cut to the chase. With that said, cut to the chase they do. They do cut to the chase, as we got to see scenes featuring the ships, the battleships, in some truly raging seas. I loved the setting. It further provided context once again of where we are. This is the Hidden Mist. Storms, seas, and inclement weather are home to the fairest of them, particularly Ikeda and Kajiki, as you know, they're painted as supposed masters of the sea. Well, in the case of the Funado and Ikeda, it's being represented in terms of the fact that it's their gifting, and then with Kajiki, we're seeing it reflected in terms of skill and experience. They're both there, you know, telling the wave. Well, they're both there commanding the waves and essentially telling their crews that it's nothing. Meanwhile, the seas are like category 10 hurricanes, if there was ever such a thing. I mean, we got little surprise features of tsunamis and whatnot. It's pretty wild. But all in all, I did enjoy the mirroring of this master-student relationship between those two, particularly in those two moments. On another note, while this voyage is taking place, we get to see our Yumi, Ikeda'S father, who's watching him command the ocean, you know, be a proud father in a sense. And that leads to a flashback showing what transpired prior to Isari's death, as he commanded his blade to deliver the kill. Once again, I mean, such an instance like that reminds us that our Yumi is willing to do whatever to whoever to get what he wants. And ultimately, I saw this as a foreshadowing of what could possibly happen in the future between him and Ikeda, particularly with him eyeing Ikeda after revisiting that memory. Meanwhile, after traveling with Kajiki, we see Boruto reasoning with Chojuro and proposing that he and his army draw back in hopes of stopping the war. I liked how Chojuro was quick to tell Boruto that although that might be an ideal, it's really not reasonable considering how deep into it they already are. He goes on to express how their pulling back wouldn't really guarantee that the Funado would do the same, especially with their pursuit of the Shinonome, and with Isari's uncanny death, they have no reason to believe that they actually would, you know, retreat their forces. This, in my opinion, was a really nice reminder to the audience that at the end of the day, Chojuro and the Feudal Lord don't know what we know. And really, in addition to this, Boruto and the others, despite them being so impassioned with their goals, they don't even know what we know either, or they don't know the full story either, I should say. And ultimately, I mean, them showing that implies that the war itself is a war in perspective, or better yet, perspectives that aren't fully fleshed out, perspectives that have a lot of holes in them and are filled with assumptions. But I think it gives more weight to what Boruto proposes, in that he's saying, hey, if you guys could just talk this through, maybe we could figure something out. Like, maybe we don't have to take it this far. But yeah, all in all, I think I really appreciate that, because at the end of the day, it shows that there's more than one side to every story. And if you're only seeing something from your perspective, it can lead to an uninvestigated bias, and worst, greater chaos and confusion. So all in all, I like that dialogue that they had, and I think it brought a lot of good points home. Playing to the same tune, in fact, it was nice to hear Kajiki's perspective earlier in the episode, as he suggested that both feuding parties, get this, are the same. Ultimately, I do commend the writers for consistently challenging the ethical versus the practical with this arc, particularly with a statement like that. And this episode was definitely no exception to that, so kudos to them. Overall, I believe this scene with Boruto and Chojuro serves as a really nice or really neat tie-in of the running theme of this unfolding story, or arc, shall I say. And it does so through a fitting plug-in of Kagura, and his unwavering belief that, or the belief in the possibility of change within every single individual, no matter how long it takes or how far off they may be. And as referenced by Kagura himself in previous episodes, this is something that he learned from Boruto. So I think it's pretty cool to see Chojuro investing that sort of faith in Boruto, being able to convince Ikeda to, chill out. But once again, we'll have to see how that goes. But in addition to this, I mean, consider the moments of redemption that we saw with Hibichigo and Buntan and Kyoho, paired with all the losses that we've seen so far in this arc, especially, whether they were unfortunate, sacrificial, vengeful. I believe that all of that we've seen so far primes us for a hopeful change in Ikeda, and the possible, or the probable, I should say, sparing of his life. Meanwhile, back on land, we see Meadowling having a moment in which he's addressing the team and echoing the same sentiment of sacrifice and believing in one another, essentially, as Kagura and Hibichigo did and would have wanted. I personally think that this was a nice moment of development for his character, and it truly does feel due, as we saw that he developed a bond with Hibichigo, in which he was challenged to step more into himself, and it was nice to see that growth evidenced in this scene. Meanwhile, back at sea, the opposing sides are gassing their people up. I mean, they're like, yeah guys, we're gonna end them, it's us against them, we can't be stopped. I mean, I'm exaggerating a bit, but I honestly couldn't help but to chuckle watching them and their pep rallies. With that said though, jokes aside, I think seeing that those paralleled scenes between the feuding ships really mirrored Kajiki's words very finely, in that he said essentially they're not very different from one another, they're just more of the same. And once again, just seeing that scene really evidenced that, and all of it, as we know or at least anticipate, is mounting for the expected battle if Boruto's plan doesn't work out. So we'll just have to see how it goes, but it's definitely amping up into something bigger that's about to take place. All in all, this episode was definitely slower than last week's, or in comparison to last week's, but I think it tapered things together pretty nicely. It filled in gaps of what led to Asari's death. It resolved, or it's resolving, or it resolved the whole Team 5 versus Boontan and Kyoho thing. And ultimately, it's just a pretty cool segue into the foreseen dialogue between Boruto and Ikeda. In fact, it seems like the Boruto versus Ikeda thing will be the focal point of the next episode, or at least Boruto talking him out of it, or attempting to talk him out of it. I personally want to see a great battle nonetheless. I can't lie. Like, I don't know. And with Ikeda seeming to not be buying into Boruto's plea in the episode promo for the next one, I could see seeing maybe a little bit of scuffles happening next episode, but nothing too crazy. If anything, I think the episode after that will be more of the true climax of the arc. Regardless though, let's say even if Boruto was to convince Ikeda to turn back at some point within the next episode, I foresee, as mentioned before, Yumi not taking too kindly to that. I could definitely see him popping off and maybe threatening Ikeda at this point, yeah, I killed your brother, you don't think I'd kill you too? It just might get pretty ugly on that side. And I honestly kind of want to see something like that happen, where Ikeda has an opportunity to usurp authority over the Funado clan, and having to challenge his father, or at least make his father surrender on some level. But regardless, I think that, if anything, will prove to be the bigger showdown if Boruto's plan goes remotely well. And I mean, who am I kidding? With all the military strength that we've seen on display for the last few episodes, I personally think that it will be a wasted opportunity to not have them do something. And that's not to say I want to see a massacre or anything like that, but once again, this arc in and of itself was very battle-filled, and I think it's really nicely set up for a really good battle in the end. And I love to see something happen. Maybe a few blades crashing, somebody falling into the ocean. I don't know, you gotta give me something. And I'm saying that with the utmost admiration for this arc, to be honest. I personally think that if ended well, this could very well be the best, if not one of the best, Boruto anime canon arcs we've seen yet. And I'm trusting they'll pull it off. I'm truly looking forward to it. Overall though, I think that this was a pretty solid episode. There weren't any crazy highs or lows, but as I said before, I think it was still an appropriate transition into what's to come. And I mean, also, lottery question of the day: where is Kawaki? What do you guys think that he could possibly be up to right now? Or, I don't know, I guess better yet, what do you think his role would be in the coming episodes? Feel free to leave your thoughts on that below. But I know the last time that we saw him, he was watching Team 7 approach Chojo's office while looking really salty. Can't lie. So, I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see how he gets integrated back into all of it. Nonetheless, though, I'm anticipating that the next ep will pick up the pace a bit, and maybe the ep after that will be the true climax of the arc. And I can't lie, I am looking forward to it. With that said, this wraps up today's video. Until next time, thank you guys for tuning in and sending all the love on the previous videos. I do see and appreciate all of you. And with that said, if you enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up and or leave a comment about your thoughts on today's episode. I'll be sure to drop in and reply if you do so sometime within the week. Also, if you're interested in more videos like this one, I invite you to subscribe to the channel So far, I've been reviewing Boruto every week for the past 4 weeks, and I do intend to keep that trend or streak ablaze. But more importantly, I'd absolutely love to have you guys join me for the ride. So with that said, thanks again for all the support and watching this video and all the other ones. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and as some of you already know, we'll chat again soon.